Executive Suites, made possible in part by the generous support of the Rhode Island Foundation. Now, Executive Suites with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi.
Providence College is moving on up. PC's School of Business jumped 34 spots in the latest Business Week rankings, the biggest leap by any school on the list. The dean, who's presided over that progress, has a resume that includes stints on Wall Street and at Yale, and she's now finishing her second year at the helm of the business school. This week on the first half of Executive Suite, the dean of the Providence College School of Business, Sylvia Maxfield. Plus, a new report finds all parts of Rhode Island's commercial real estate market showed continued improvement last year. What's the outlook for 2014? On the second half, we get the latest on local real estate from Capstone Properties Vice President Neil Amper. Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi. As I said there, later in the show, we're going to get an update from Neil on the commercial real estate market last year and what the outlook is for this year. But right now, I'm very pleased to be joined by Sylvia Maxfield, Dr. Sylvia Maxfield. She's the Dean of Providence College School of Business. And thank you for coming. I'm glad to have you.
Thanks for inviting me, Ted.
So I want to start with the easy question. You'd been at Simmons College for a number of years when you took this job back in 2012. What attracted you to Providence College School of Business? Why did you decide this is the place you wanted to be?
A combination of a great liberal arts undergraduate education and a business school. I think that combo is awesome. There's an awful lot of pure business schools, but there are not that many great liberal arts campuses with business schools on them.
And why do you think that's important to have that combination together? I know that's something you've thought about a lot.
Well, it's been a hallmark of my career. I've always had one foot in the business world and one foot in another world, and so the integration of the two is a powerful thing for me personally in my career. I often said when I went to Wall Street, I was hoping to contribute to economic development. I sold sovereign bonds for emerging market countries, and I used to tell people I was doing nonprofit work, and they would look at me and say, "Wait, you're on Wall Street? You're doing nonprofit work?" So I think it's just a great way to get educated. Employers always tell me, "Give me a kid that can think critically, that's got a high EQ, who I can put in front of a client. I can teach them a lot of the technical stuff if they've got the good liberal arts background."
Let's talk about the school itself. The business school formally created in 2007, right? The PC Business School, although the program was sort of existing in other forms.
Yeah, it's a young school.
It's a young school, and actually just before you arrived in middle of 2012, it got accredited. And I know this had been a push for a long time at PC to get the American Association of Collegiate Business Schools to accredit the program. For people at home, why was that a big deal? Why did it matter to get accredited? You could open without accreditation, but PC wanted that.
Well, you can't get it usually without a big investment. So it comes with a big price tag, and that means better salaries for faculty, more high-profile faculty. So there was a significant investment made by Providence College to actually get to that point, and that equals quality if it's well managed. But you can't even participate in most of the rankings if you're not AACSB accredited. So it opens a lot of doors. The first thing I did, second day on the job, was decide that we were going to go in for the rankings, and we wouldn't have been able to do that if we'd not been accredited. But it puts you in an elite, in a very elite group. It's a little bit over 500 schools in the United States that are AACSB accredited.
And you mentioned those rankings. I mentioned them at the top of the show there. 34 spots, not bad. The basketball program would always be happy with that kind of jump to at PC. This was on Business Week's undergrad business school rankings. Came out just last month in April. You must have been pleased by that. Why the jump? What were they smiling upon you for in that?
I was pretty thrilled about that. It exceeded our expectations, I would say. We have a strategic goal of being up in the top 50, and maybe we'll get there. We ranked 25th in the employer part of that survey. So they do an anonymous survey of national employers, asking them about the quality of the graduates that they get from undergraduate business programs. And so we were 25th out of 150. And what they tell me time and time again, I was just up in Boston this morning doing a big breakfast panel, and I heard it again. I always hear it. It's kind of, it's a little bit counter to the stereotype of the millennials. They say, PC School of Business kids.
Good, because I am one, so let's hear it.
There you go. Well, they say PC School of Business kids come to the workplace with a good amount of humility, which is uncommon, at least given the stereotype of the millennials. Tremendously hard work ethic. resilient. They'll go at things a couple of times to get it right, and a really strong moral compass.
Moral compass, that actually is a good transition, because when I was reading the Business Week story about the rankings, number one in there, Notre Dame, another Catholic school, and one of the students specifically said he liked being in a business program. This was a Notre Dame student that had a certain values orientation, a certain thinking about the world and making the world better and that kind of thing. I'm curious for PC, how does its orientation as a Catholic school, as a school with a mission and a legacy there, how does that impact what you do at the business school?
Well, I think our students understand the value of trust. They come in, and you can equate that to a high EQ if you like. Maybe that's a moral compass.
EQ, for people who don't know, what is it?
EQ. They have really good interpersonal skills. They tend to see the big picture. They tend to be able to see questions from multiple angles. Those are the kinds of qualities that we herald in the liberal arts education world. And that infuses our business program. One of the most unique things that we have going for us is World Civilizations is a 4-semester ordeal for some students.
I've heard of
at
it from my
Providence
friends
College.
who went through PC. Yeah.
And we have a new 4th semester, which is a small discussion-based opportunity on completely new topics. So we put traditional World Civilizations faculty together with non-traditional World Civilizations faculty. We put them through a speed dating exercise, and out of that speed dating exercise came pairs of faculty who would never otherwise work together, who created discussion-based seminars that draw on the prior 3 semesters curriculum. I've got 7 business school faculty teaching in that program, and so that gives the business declared major an opportunity to see the connections as a sophomore between business and the broader questions that you ask when you study world civilizations. So there's no other business school in the country that's offering their students that, and it's kind of a hallmark of the way we combine liberal arts education and business education.
Coming up to a break, but for that I do want to ask about facility. I know that PC's been saying for a long time the plan was to build a full facility for the business school. Where does that plan stand right now? What do you see yourself having a new office anytime soon?
That'd be great, because my office is about the size of this oval table. We're continuing to invest in the prep work to get that project going, and I fundraise a lot. And as soon as we get somebody's name to hang on the front door, we'll go full speed ahead.
Any idea of when you might break ground on the project, or does that depend on the fundraising?
PC will celebrate its centennial in 2017, and I think everybody involved is hoping that we're in the building by that time at the latest.
All right, we'll remember that. We'll have you back then to double check. Stay with us on Executive Suite. We're going to talk more with Sylvia Maxfield about her vision of values-based leadership and why some women face a glass cliff when they get into the highest reaches of the business world, plus an update on commercial real estate later on. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi. Later on the show, as I said, we're going to get an update on commercial real estate from Neil Amper of the Capstone Properties, an old friend of ours here on Executive Suite. But right now, very pleased to be joined by Sylvia Maxfield. She's the Dean of Providence College School of Business. And Sylvia, you've written about this idea of values-based leadership. And I can imagine some of our hard-nosed viewers at home saying, well, that sounds like a good way to make your business inefficient and not make a profit or whatnot. But I know you have a certain vision of what that means and why it's important. Tell us about that.
Well, a lot of the value in publicly traded companies is in intangibles these days. So, 30 years ago, you added up the value of your company and it was all kinds of tangible things. It was buildings. It's all intangibles like knowledge, business processes, intellectual property. And in order to protect that, you've got to respect people and be respected. And so I actually think that values-based leadership is the right kind of leadership for a knowledge economy, which is an intangibles value economy.
What would that mean in practice? How would a company that's trying to apply values-based leadership run its business? What would they look out for? What would they try to do or not do?
Well, I'm arguing that you hire PC grads because they understand the value of trust, they understand the importance of trust, they understand the importance of upholding the reputation of your company, right? So the biggest intangible is reputation. So that's what I would say. But corporate social responsibility is a huge practice in the 21st century enterprise right now, and that means minding the social face of business. And the business reason to do that is because if a big part of the value of your company is your brand or your reputation, if you do things that can be construed as damaging the community or damaging stakeholders, that's going to detract from the value of your company.
And I think of how we just had Earth Day pass by. I saw a lot of companies pushing out their environmental, social responsibility. The Apple website, the front page changed to what they're doing to try to recycle and all that. I mean, do you think most companies are starting to think of that as this is worth doing, or they still see it as a sign of, well, we have to do it for PR reasons, but it's a financial loss?
No, I think because intangible value is so large, coming from brand, coming from reputation, coming from business process, they're doing it because they recognize that it helps to keep, if they're publicly traded, the value of their stock up. And to some extent, they're doing it to keep the value of their stock from going down. But that's a very hard-nosed financial reason to mind the social face of your enterprise.
Another company you've written about that did something like that, a local one we talked about here, was that high-profile decision by CVS Caremark to stop selling tobacco products later this year. About 2% of their revenue, possibly the hit at first on that. In CVS's case, what did you see as the reasoning behind that decision? Why did they decide this was the time to do that?
Again, I think that was a business decision that stemmed from looking out into the future and saying, if we are going to become a healthcare company, we have to jettison some of the lines of business that we had in the past that are inconsistent with being a healthcare company. So, again, it's wonderful because in a knowledge economy, in a reputation economy, you can do well and do good because both of those things align.
Another thing you wrote recently that I teased it there, and I was really interested in with this op-ed you wrote about the glass cliff effect. You were talking specifically about Janet Yellen, of course, just became the Federal Reserve chairwoman, took over for Ben Bernanke, the first woman to have that job. And you wrote, quote, "I am both thrilled and worried for Janet Yellen." Why?
Well, because I didn't make that term up. It's a term that folks who study the role of women in leadership have identified, a syndrome where women get these big, powerful jobs at moments when the enterprises that they're asked to lead are facing huge challenges. And that's what happened to Janet Yellen. The Fed is facing a huge challenge over the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years. And I do think she's up for it, but I think it was exactly the same as putting Marissa Myers in at Yahoo when probably they went after a lot of guys. I'm not saying she wasn't their first choice, but I can imagine a lot of guys saying, I'll wait for the next thing because that looks like a high risk opportunity. And women, because they're not offered those opportunities as frequently, are more likely to say, I'll take that risk. I'll take those
That's
odds.
interesting. And you see perhaps sometimes a causation there that because the enterprise is having trouble, men get the first chance and take a pass. And a woman who says, all right, this is my chance to take that top job, she gets it, but she gets handed a world of hurt.
And that's what the research tells us often happens. Janet Yellen is more than up to the task.
Of course.
She's done very well in her first couple of months. So I'm probably less worried than I was, but I am worried about the Fed's policy, the space for policy in general going forward.
We are running out of time, but I have to ask you before we go about a group of PC students just opened a small business, a cafe on Douglas Avenue in Providence. You worked with them. How did that project come about?
Well, that's values-based leadership. That is using business skills and knowledge to benefit the underserved community that is along Douglas Avenue, Smith Hill. And there couldn't be anything more quintessentially PC School of Business. That was a joint effort by kids who study global studies and finance, accounting, and marketing majors, and they came together and they decided to do this. And it took them 8 months, and at times I wondered whether it was actually going to happen because the adults around said this has to be a student initiative, and gosh darn it, they just had their opening, and it really makes me very proud.
How's the coffee?
Coffee is actually great. It's fair trade coffee, and the idea came actually from a spring break service trip to Nicaragua, and the coffee's awesome.
Very cool. All right, well, we'll have to try it out on Douglas Avenue. You can find the cafe. Sylvia Maxfield, thanks so much for joining me. I want to have you back.
Take care. Thanks so much.
All right, and stay with us because it's coming up next. Neil Amper from Capstone Properties breaks down what happened in commercial real estate last year and what's going to happen this year. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and now I'm very pleased to be joined once again. He's coming back. Neil Amper, Vice President of Capstone Properties in Providence, one of the larger real estate management firms in the state that does, you see their signs all over on different properties, what they're doing. Neil, thanks for being back.
Thank you.
So, as always, we have the Capstone Report. You do this twice a year, I believe. It's free on your website, and I highly recommend people read this if they're curious about what's going on. You have a great breakdown of the transactions that have been happening, the trends we see. It's really good, so I recommend it. Go to Capstone Properties site for it. Let's just start, Neil, very broadly. What did it look like when you looked back? What was 2013 like for commercial real estate in Rhode Island?
Well, 2012 was a very good year for Rhode Island. 2013 was also a good year. We're a small market, so any jump in the sales as well as the volume, dollars, is significant for us. We went from 219 sales total to 239.
That's across all types of commercial buildings, right?
All types of buildings. And the volume went from 363 to 479 million. And that's across the board. And so it wasn't insignificant because we had a lot of smaller sales as well as a lot of larger sales. The smaller user for leasing as well as purchasing, we haven't seen them in the kind of calls we've been getting over the last year, maybe year and a half, than we had seen in the previous 5 years. The smaller user, owner-occupied property suddenly people are starting to think about that again.
So a little bit of positive green shoots you see there, a change.
Right, and that's the majority of the market. The majority of the market in Rhode Island is under 50,000 square feet in all categories, whether it's retail, office, or industrial.
Now, if we look back, Neil, to again check out the report on Capstone Properties site, but back in 2007, before the bust, we're still not at sales value at the same level as 2007 and 2013, all these years later. I mean, is that a fair approximation that we still haven't recovered all the ground we lost?
No, we have not recovered. The value of individual properties has risen because one of the residuals of the recession was there's really very little building in the state. If you go 50 miles up the road to the Boston area, there's cranes and new construction and speculative building all over the place. And in Rhode Island, you just don't get that because our rents haven't recovered. And in order to build an investment property, the rents have to improve, and they haven't.
And we always talk about around that problem in the net income for a new building, right? That
Correct.
Rents just are not high enough to make the numbers work once you put in the cost of building it, the taxes, and everything else.
That's correct. But there is a section of the marketplace that outperformed everything else, and that was the apartment complex.
Tell me more about that. Yeah, you talked about that in this report. It stuck out to you.
Yeah, the apartments, and we don't evaluate that every year because sometimes it's not significant, but the last 2 years it was pretty significant. And the apartments more than doubled in terms of units sold. And what that tells us is that the rents are stable and maybe even increasing a little bit, and people are looking at apartments as a better value purchase than maybe office space or a mixed-use industrial building.
You're talking there about investors looking at an income-generating property.
Correct.
So with those apartments, do you think that fits in with the story we've been hearing more and more about? Pretty high occupancy rates in the apartment buildings in downtown Providence, in that area. Yet we don't see a lot of building of apartments either.
No. There hasn't been a lot of speculative building in terms of apartments because there seems to be an equalization of what people are looking for the type of property and what's available. Downtown, the residential has increased dramatically. I mean, the old National Grid office building is now apartments.
The G building, yeah.
Right, and he's looking to do another project. So when my office is downtown, I see people walking dogs and jogging in the morning at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. It's fairly dramatic compared to what it was just 5 years ago.
God bless them, jogging at 6 in the morning. So let me ask you about some other parts of the market. How did industrial real estate do? Sales value, I think you said up 20% last year?
Yes, the volume has increased. The smaller user under 15,000 square feet, that's increased quite significantly. The larger buildings are a little more problematic because you don't have the same depth of economy that you do up in Massachusetts. But still, the properties have got sold, and prices have moved up to the point where if somebody's looking for a building that's 20 or 25,000 square feet, there's not that many to choose from.
We were actually talking to one of your competitors, I know you guys get along, Alden Anderson from CB Richard Ellis a few weeks back, and he said the same thing, that yes, there are vacancies, as you show in the Capstone report here, but it doesn't always match what someone actually wants in terms of square footage and in terms of the type of amenities and facilities they want.
Well, you see a lot of signs. I mean, there's signs all over the state, but when someone's looking for something to manufacture, it might be too big, too small, too fat, too skinny. The ceilings are too low, not enough loading docks. I mean, there's always that profile of that owner-occupied user who says, listen, I'm not moving unless I have 18-foot ceilings and 3 loading docks.
Yeah.
It's not that available.
Tell me about the retail real estate market. I think that's a very vivid one to people, average folks who aren't involved in this as business people, because they remember going into the old Blockbuster or the pizza store that used to be there, and they're always wondering what's happening. What do you see happening in retail real estate in Rhode Island right now?
The retail has changed dramatically, as everybody knows, with the internet, but surprisingly enough, there has been a lot of growth in the retail market in Rhode Island, with new people coming in. For instance, the Container Store coming into Garden City. Garden City has completely revamped their center and brought in national tenants. LA Fitness is in there.
Which was Borders, I think, right?
Which was Borders,
Yeah.
great. Chapel View. There's a new Staples going in there. It's the whole marketplace has begun to absorb, and people are buying again. There was a developer investor from Massachusetts. His name is Adam Winstanley. He bought the old Rhode Island Mall and then turned around and sold the Kohl's and the Walmart, and then recovered a significant amount of his investment. But he's going to turn that mall around. That mall was laying fallow for years.
Yeah, not a place a lot of us were shopping in recent times. Yeah.
There was nothing there.
Before we get to the end of the show, I do want to ask your outlook for the rest of this year. How's 2014 looking so far from your vantage point, and what's the feeling in your business?
There's more business. There's more phone calls. There's more people looking. It hasn't translated quite yet into new sales because people are just starting to get used to the pricing. 5-6 years ago, they might have been able to buy an industrial building for $30 or $40 a square foot. That same industrial building might be $50 or $55 a square foot. So there is that dichotomy of the value of now as opposed to what they think it should be during the recession years, and it's that where do those lines meet?
You need capitulation, like they say in the stock market.
Where does that
People have to accept it.
negotiation
Yeah.
end up?
All right, well, we're going to check back in with you, Neil. Of course, next time it comes out, as I said, it's a great report, the Capstone report. Google Capstone Properties, go to their website, and you can find it right there. I want to thank Neil Amper for being here and Sylvia Maxfield from Providence College, who joined us on the first half of the show. Be sure to join us next week when my guest will be Hope Global CEO Cheryl Merchant. And if you missed any of this show or any other episode of Executive Suite, you can catch all of those on our website, WPRI.com. I'll see you back here next weekend.